The Baltimore Ravens roster is loaded, but how loaded? We're breaking that down for you today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins, and we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins.
Joe, the Ravens are a wagon. We're going to get into some of the nature of this football team, but they are I think the first great example of a team that we're going to cover that had like a peak in 23 and then a transition year in which they competed through, and then 1 year on the other side of that transitional period. They're very much back to looking like a problem again.
Well, I'd say they were every bit of a problem last year, right?
Last year with the transition.
Yeah, and it's they did a good job of kind of bringing it back. A little bit of transition here and there, which we'll obviously explore today. But this looks like a football team primed to hit the ground running. And I mean, I thought last year their A game was better than anyone else's. If they played their best football, they were the best team in the league. That's the challenge for Baltimore, is playing that best football in the playoffs. That's kind of been the issue. But you feel like this team, from a capacity perspective, is pretty stock full of impact playmakers and a lot of young talent as well. So yeah, excited to explore them with you today.
We're going to put everybody into cornerstone buckets and quality starters and sufficient level starters. We've got a whole scoring methodology that's associated with that. Goes as far down as quality depth, replacement level players, incomplete evaluations, rookies, non-roster caliber players, and practice squad caliber players. And then when we do all 32 teams, we're going to grade, cross-check, and then finalize the grades with the scoring system that we have, puts out roster power rankings. This one's going to be near the top when it's all said and done. I can't believe that Derrick Henry is still a roster cornerstone, but he's every bit of the definition of a roster cornerstone for me as a player. Had an electric season last year, and the way that he fit Baltimore, but then Baltimore simultaneously was able to use a little bit less fullback, and what that meant for when they were in 12 and 11 and running the ball out of those packages with Lamar and his run game dynamics and Derrick and him feeding off of that was just this really great blend of what Derrick did well and what Baltimore did well beforehand, blending into something that was a little bit more unique and tailored to both guys.
Yeah, I think they benefited from each other where, I mean, obviously Derrick Henry had all the rushing yards, right? I mean, it was incredibly productive season, 1,900 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns, but it was also Lamar Jackson's first 4,000-yard passing season, 41 touchdowns. Like, there was definitely a complementary component to how those guys were able to play off of each other and what it unlocked for each of them individually. It's a great ecosystem for any of them individually. It's lethal when they're together. I mean, what did this rushing offense? It was like they showed up and it's 200 yards rushing, man. But then they throw the ball too, right? Like, it was Lamar's best season as a passer. So it's nightmarish, man. It's not anything that any team is built to deal with. It's too many problems. And
so they were second in the league in rush attempts. They had 554 rush attempts. And they were also first in the league in yards per attempt at 5.8 yards per carry.
It's insane. It's insane. And they also average over 8 yards per pass. The only team, they're 8.1 yards per pass. Number 2 is the Lions at 7.7.
Yeah.
I mean, good luck.
Half yard Higher.
Yeah, dude, they're
And they've added DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
Now, DeAndre Hopkins isn't DeAndre Hopkins anymore, just like I would say Mark Andrews isn't Mark Andrews anymore. I think those are the two players that I look at as players that are kind of on a descent with their trajectory. I would still put Hopkins as a sufficient level starter, and I would still put Mark Andrews as a sufficient level starter. But the other players they have in those two rooms, I mean, we're finally starting to see it with Rashad Bateman, and some of that's just been availability for him. Zay Flowers had that elusive Baltimore Ravens 1,000-yard receiving season for a wide receiver. I think it was his second one. The Hollywood Brown had one, and now
geez, yeah. I didn't think about that. It's probably been a minute, right? They hadn't been a high volume passing offense in a while. So.
No. Coach Harbaugh came out and said he hopes to see Isaiah Likely be an All-Pro and thinks he's capable of it. And I'll tell you what, man, I've done some Ravens coverage with what I'm doing with A to Z Sports, and looking at this football team and Isaiah Likely's impact on it. Like, teams can make decisions to take away Derrick Henry when they want to, or roll the coverage to Zay Flowers. Likely in those situations is such a problem matchup player. And I think he's on the ascent. I think he's probably going to get a contract sooner rather than later. And I think the Ravens would be smart to get that one done because both him and Andrews are in contract years. And I know who's going to be the expensive one after 2025, and his name's not going to be Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I think the arrival of DeAndre Hopkins, while he's no longer the 150 target a year player, I think his presence as an outside threat to win leverage battles on the perimeter really helps open up the middle of the field, where I think their best players are optimized, like a Zay Flowers, like the tight end pairing. Even Rashad Bateman is a guy that I think can work in the middle of the field. So I think that's how DeAndre Hopkins really helps this offense, not because I think he's going to come in and catch a ton of passes. It's the skill set and how it works together with the rest of them to optimize what they're best at.
Right.
Is it okay to defend Mark Andrews? I feel like the world is down on him. And boy, did he cost him the divisional round.
It's a recency bias,
yeah, it's
right? It's
the had 11 touchdowns.
Is Mark Andrews dropping the 2-point conversion. So
well, and the fumble, right? Two horrible plays, catastrophic plays. And he'll go down. He's going to go down like Lee Evans for dropping that pass, right? Like whatever is the conference championship game. It's like, well, there's the difference between going to the Super Bowl now. I get that. Guy had 11 touchdowns and 670 something yards, and his separation metrics were outstanding. So I'm not ready to bury Mark Andrews yet. I do recognize Isaiah Likely. He was tight end one for, I think, both of us that year he coming out. We loved Isaiah Likely. People lost their minds though because the athletic testing wasn't super elite, but watch the guy play, man. Such a skilled football player in so many different ways in the receiving game. But I'm not ready to bury Mark Andrews. And I think there's life. You see what Zach Ertz is doing, right? I mean, Mark Andrews can't do this,
I think Ertz had a little bit more juice and a little bit more fluidity than Mark did at their primes. Is that fair to say?
I'm not sure I agree. I think it's close. You said a little bit. If you want, okay, a little bit.
A little bit.
Not a material difference to me.
Yeah. So I believe I want to pull this up to make sure I get this right, but I believe Mark spent a lot of time in the slot.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah.
And that kind of look, when you've got Isaiah Likely and you've got Patrick Ricard and you've got Mark Andrews and you play all these heavy 21. I think Baltimore had the third or fourth highest incidence of 21 personnel the last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Their 12 personnel was the highest DPA output for a 12 personnel grouping in a single season in the last 20 years. And they lapped the field. There was only one other team within 25 points of them for EPA. You have all these different personnel packages and groupings. And to tie it real quick while I go back and make sure I check that stat on Mark Andrews, you add DeAndre Hopkins as the third receiver for when you want to play 11 personnel. And, we really want to get into passing situations. You could have Justice Hill or Keaton Mitchell come on the field to be the receiving back. Is this – we're not talking about Lamar because quarterbacks are their own separate conversation. Is this the most personnel package diverse grouping in the AFC? We want to live in 11, we can live in 11. We want to live in 12, we can live in 12. We want to line up and go super heavy and go 21 with a fullback, we go 21 with a fullback.
Probably. Yeah, it's close. It'd be close. I mean, I'd have to do the inventory. I'd say it's one of the best for sure.
I was going to say the NFL, and then I'm like, well, we're halfway through. We'll figure that out. We could have those kinds of comments. But let me go AFC, see if Joe's comfortable with that line of the water. So I'm inclined to agree with you, and I would be willing to bet that when it's all said and done, it is the group that we look at and say, whether you want to live in 21, whether you want to live in 12, whether you want to live in 11, this group has the most appeal to universally be the same team that does all that on a week-by-week basis.
Problems that they present for defenses. And you mentioned Justin Hill. I thought he certainly had his best year all around. Leaning into the pass catching ability there a little bit more, I think was nice. Then we'll see. Keaton Mitchell 2 years ago was quite the X factor. He's, further removed from injury. Rasheen Ali is a draft pick. I obviously don't want to lose Derrick Henry, but it's kind of interesting to consider the mix of backs they have in terms of depth. All right, we got to talk trenches here, O-line, D-line, a little bit of transition on both sides, but a lot to like. We'll break that down for you here next. Be sure to stick with us. The NBA Finals get started tonight. Thunder, Pacers. It's a lot of fun. These playoffs have been fun. They deliver highlight-worthy performances, huge momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. So check it out. Get in on the action over at FanDuel. FanDuel is going to make it easy for you to stay in the game before tip-off and live. They got player props. They have performance trends. You can do same-game parlays. There's so many different ways for fans to play smart and win big. I've been having a lot of fun. My parlay last night on the hockey finals did not hit. Sam Reiner let me down. I got all the other legs together, but building a little something tonight for Thunder Pacers. The Tyrese Halliburton overs, maybe a double-double for him. I might bet on that. I feel good about that Thunder money line. So we'll package something together and have some fun tonight as we get the NBA Finals going. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head on over to FanDuel.com. Place that first $5 bet. If it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Yeah, Mark, 382 snaps in the slot last year, and then 200 snaps out wide for Mark as well. Let me ask you this. Cornerstones in this skill group. Who did you have?
Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry.
Okay. So I obviously have Lamar, I have Derrick Henry. That was all that I had as well. Quality starters in this group.
Zay Flowers. I had Mark Andrews as a quality starter.
Okay.
I'm not ready to quit. I'm not.
And if you want to lean into the full body of work, I think it's totally justified. I'm more so, I look at where that room is going.
Oh, it's going to likely. I know that.
Yeah.
So
did you have likely as a sufficient level starter?
I do, but like arrow pointing up.
Okay, so I just have him flip-flopped.
Right.
I'm banking on this season likely being. So I have likely as the quality starter, and Andrews is the sufficient.
Is that a bold bet? Is Isaiah likely more receiving production than Mark Andrews this year?
We would have to come to the metrics of what qualifies, but I'd be fine doing something on that.
Is Mark Andrews on the Ravens? I keep thinking about the Chargers as a team that could be in the market for
sense.
Yeah. The Greg
Maybe the
Roman
Steelers
thing.
Now that they're just calling everybody for tight ends.
Get 4 or 5 tight ends, Why not?
Yeah, we'll just play 05 personnel.
John, think about John. Just hit me on Jonnu Smith. We won't sidebar too long here. It's probably nice for him to be in Miami where he could be the lead tight end. Like he's had Kyle Pitts, he's had Hunter Henry.
Now you're gonna trade me to Pittsburgh to play with Freiermuth, and
I got 110 targets waiting for me in Miami.
Cam Wolf said the quiet thing out loud. He said, Jonnu wants to be in Miami, and Miami also would love to get an extension done or get a deal done with Jonnu Smith. So usually that means that you're just going to have to negotiate it out, and that's not going to happen unless you get a Godfather deal.
Leverage Smith. Yeah. All right.
Bateman, sufficient level starter.
Sufficient level starter. Yeah.
And DeAndre Hopkins, sufficient level starter.
Sufficient level starter.
Okay, so we got a high floor.
Yeah.
With the skill group.
Yeah.
And that's before you get to the offensive line, which we'll start with Roger Rosengarten looks like a hit. After he took over after the first month of the season. It was Makari for the first month, and then Makari moves inside because Andrew Voorhees gets hurt, and then Makari never lets it go. He starts the rest of the year. Faalele has settled in as an interior guy. Tyler Linderbaum, now that Frank Ragnow's gone, has a little bit less competition for the claim of the best center in football.
Yeah.
Ronnie Stanley back on was it 3 for $60 was the terms of that deal, which I think is a pretty good price point. The concern is the health and durability as you continue to get a little older with Ronnie, but I think they've protected themselves well with some of the other guys that they have in the depth of the offensive line.
Yeah, bringing in Joe Noteboom was an experienced player, drafting Emory Jones as well. And you have some position.
Carson Vincent. Drafting Carson Vincent.
Carson Vincent. And I think, like, if you needed to, I think Faalele can play some tackle and you can mess around with the interior if you had to do it. Yeah, I think what's your only real question here is Andrew Voorhees at left guard. He started the season, got hurt, came back, finished up the end. We just haven't learned much about him as he enters his third season. Injuries have always been the deal with Voorhees. But they bring back Ben Cleveland, who's been like the part of the depth for a while here. Not having Patrick McCarry, who's been the fill-in-the-blanks guy for so many years, right, is definitely a loss. Like, I don't think that they're quite as deep with their offensive line as they were with McCarry, because you felt like he can just figure it out for you, whatever you needed. So I really like this group. It's just about Voorhees at left guard and making sure that from a depth perspective, hopefully they don't have to tap into it, but if they do, they don't have that super sub at their disposal.
So the good news is I agree Voorhees is the question mark, but between Voorhees and Emory Jones, who's recovering from a shoulder issue, so it might put him behind the 8 ball a little bit, but I think he could be a better interior player than he is tackle, with kind of the aggression and the play demeanor, where I thought most of his worst reps came out in space. And he's expected to maybe get a chance to compete there. They drafted Garrett Dellinger, who started significant time at LSU. Joe Noteboom has played guard in his career. You want Voorhees to win the job because he was groomed to win the job, and he won the job last year at the beginning of camp.
Right.
If he doesn't win the job, you got 4 guys. Somebody will give you a high enough floor to serve as, if that's the weakest link in your 5 and he's playing between Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum, you're going to be okay, right? And then the depth, I mean, Stanley, Voorhees, Linderbaum, Faalele, Rosengarten, you project that to 5. Noteboom is the swing tackle. Emory Jones is the top 100 developmental guy. Vincent is the long-term developmental guy to potentially replace Ronnie Stanley. Ideally, he doesn't have to play. That's your 1 through 8 before you get to Dellinger as a young guy. So they're obviously betting on the LSU Tigers offensive line development to have them ready to come in and be quality depth players off the jump. But I think they have appealing options in addition to a group up front that I feel pretty good about going to battle with.
Defensive line looking pretty stellar. If you're odd front, Justin Madubuike, I have as a cornerstone. Travis Jones at the nose, so I have a quality starter.
Yes.
Broderick Jones is kind of the 5 tech, who I think is like a very
Washington.
What'd I say?
Jones. You got Pittsburgh on your mind.
Broderick Washington, as I think he's probably quality depth, but I think he fits a good role for them. I think the breakout player here is going to be Tavius Robinson. I thought he really came on late in the season last year, entering his 3rd year. He's a guy to keep an eye on here. They bring in John Jenkins to pair with Travis Jones after Michael Pierce, hung it up. So they got their double nose tackle extraordinaire piece. And Aeneas Peebles, like, for this defensive line, this feels like the exact perfect fit with kind of his penetration style, like very unique. Like, you could see him being able to spell Madubuike and give you some upside off the bench. So I like what they have in terms of that front, and certainly the edge situation. I mean, Kyle Van Noy feels like he's ageless, dude. I think he's getting better with age. Owe has been a pretty consistent pressure player in a contract year. He's added weight. And then Mike Green, who's, a lot of people thought was a first-round guy. You get him in 2nd round. I mean, there's edge, interior. They got dudes.
And then a 3rd-round pick from last year in Adisa Isaac, too.
Yeah.
Um,
Not to mention David Ajabu, who's only 25, right?
You super glossed over Odafe Owe gaining weight. Gained 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Have you seen the pictures?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. And he almost doubled his career sack total last year, playing less than 700 snaps. What's interesting to me for Baltimore, to not get down a rabbit hole, and I know we got to get the break. So let me ask you this. Madubuike cornerstone, I agree. Travis Jones, quality starter, I agree. I also had Van Noy as a quality starter, and then I had Owe as a sufficient level starter.
I have it the same, except for I had Owe as a quality starter and Van Noy as a sufficient starter. But
okay, so we just flip-flop them.
Yeah, they'll get the same points.
You are not kidding about Van Noy. 2 years in Baltimore, he's got 21 and a half sacks.
Yeah, he's
34 this year, age 34 season.
It's a great fit for him, dude. He's a problem.
Made his first Pro Bowl last year. I was happy for him.
Yeah. All right, back 7. We'll break that down for you here next. Be sure to stick with us.
A lot of options for them. And now that we have a little bit of time, what's interesting for me with Baltimore is, and I actually wrote this for A to Z yesterday, Travis Jones in a contract year. Kyle Van Noy's in a contract year. Always in a contract year. Kyle Hamilton's extension eligible. Tyler Linderbaum is extension eligible, and they declined the 5th-year option because it would have been $20-something million for a center on 5th-year option because the dumb CBA puts all the offensive line contracts in the same bucket. They got a lot. Darius Washington, we'll see. He's supposed to. We're going to talk about him in this group. He tore his Achilles. Harbaugh's expecting him back in November or December. It was a clean tear, which means the recovery window. Now, is he going to be 100%? Who knows? But it's more business that they'll have to handle. What order are you putting some of these guys in?
Oh, geez.
Very difficult, right?
Yeah, I mean, I prioritize Linderbaum. That'd be high on my list.
I get Hamilton done too before that.
That's extension eligible, right?
Goes any higher.
Yeah, I think those two you want to get done before they go any higher. They both played 3 seasons.
Yeah, they're in the same draft class.
Yeah, get those done ASAP. Man, even isn't Zay Flowers will be eligible after this season.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean Linderbaum and Hamilton to me are the priorities.
How much do you think Travis Jones could get on the open market?
Is there a comparable deal to his lately? Like that type of guy? I think it's probably around 20 million.
That's probably the number that I had in my head. Yeah. So would you rather do that? Or would you pay Odafe Owe coming off a double-digit season?
I feel like they position themselves to transition away from Owe and their behavior with edge rushers.
That's how they've always done it. Right?
Yeah.
So, and that was the point of the piece that I wrote was I would wait on Owe altogether.
For sure.
You know, he's the one with the volatility of that market. What's the price point? He had a 1-year breakout. Now he's adding weight. It could go really well. It could not go really well. Like,
yeah. He's used to having a certain amount of explosiveness, and I'm sure he'll still be plenty explosive, but adjusting to that, that's always a little bit different for guys. So.
With having Mike Green and Robinson and Isaac as a guy in the pipe and the hit that they had with Van Noy. Yeah, I think they got a lot of great options, but that's enough for financial decisions for Baltimore. Instead, we could get to this back 7.
Start with linebacker Roquan Smith. I have him as a cornerstone. Then it's I would say if there's a true question about this roster, it's probably right here, where Trenton Simpson, they planned on him starting last year, and he didn't hold that job all year. And now we're back in that spot where he's the assumed starter next to Roquan Smith, and there's not a lot of depth. Like Jake Hummel, Teddy Buchanan, a rookie. Like, that's what you have. There's a lot riding on Trenton Simpson to be the answer next to Roquan Smith this year. So I guess if probably an okay question, if your biggest question is, who's going to be Roquan Smith's running mate and who's going to play between Ronnie Stanley and Linderbaum, you're probably okay. But I feel like that's something that I'm paying attention to, because they wound up having to play a good amount of like Malik Harrison, who's a fundamentally different player than Trenton Simpson, who was always, hey, super athletic, but can you get the processing stuff down? There's a lot riding on him in year 3.
I would not be surprised to see one of these undrafted free agents make this roster at linebacker between Jay Higgins and Chandler Martin. I like Chandler Martin a good bit coming out of Memphis. He plays the brand of football that I think Baltimore could really get attached to. And obviously they have a rookie pick there in Buchanan, who had the 1 year at Cal and was super productive. And so they'll bet on Roquan being the anchor, and everything outside of that is player development. And I think that's the thing that stands out to me, Joe, is we did the Bengals earlier this week, and we talked about the entire outlook of the Bengals was going to be dependent on the bets that they were placing and drafting.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it looks like when it works, right? Because you up and down this roster see Madubuikes and Travis Joneses and Tavius Robinsons and Odafe Always. That's just in the defensive front. It happens everywhere on the roster. The offensive line, the pipeline that they've built. The tight end room is comprised almost exclusively of guys that they've drafted outside the top 2 rounds and have turned into really good football players. And that includes Charlie Kolar, who we didn't even talk about.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a proven body of work for this to work in Baltimore. And that's why my tone when I look at some of the same storyline that we're looking at in Cincinnati versus in Baltimore's shown the competency in doing the draft and develop thing. But it really is a beautiful thing when you sit here and look at, we got guys peaking and Malik Harrison. I thought, I just got done giving him flowers yesterday. I thought a kind of a role specific guy who blossomed with time. And now you got different guys that are young guys that are coming up behind it. And I'm not too fazed by the lack of depth there, but I do think it's fair to point out, like, Trenton Simpson's a guy I think should be under a lot of pressure, because I think there's a lot of names behind him that somebody it could click with.
A little bit of transition at corner. Of course, first-round pick Nate Wiggins back. I thought he had a good rookie season, got better throughout. Marlon Humphrey was unbelievable last year. And then your other corner spot was Brandon Stevens, who I know Ravens fans are very excited to see leave. And, of course, like Tre'Davious White, they signed and played meaningful snaps down the stretch for them, kind of in a platoon role with Brandon Stevens when they went to their dime stuff. But they bring in Chidobe Awuzie, who I think he can elevate that spot. In addition to, like, TJ Tampa, you talk about player development. I mean, that's a guy that was he a 4th-round pick last year?
Yeah.
I think he's your best hedge against Chidobe Awuzie, who's 30 and he's had some injuries lately. But even Jalen Armour Davis, who was a 3rd-round pick, who's still on a rookie deal, like, those are your players in the pipeline that give you a bit of a hedge against Awuzie, who I think, if he's available, I think he's a sufficient level starter.
They also have 2 rookies in Longer Beam and Cone who can play a little bit of football as well. And you got Starks coming in at safety with Marlon Humphrey and Kyle Hamilton and Nate Wiggins. Doesn't take a lot of imagination to figure out where Baltimore likes to spend some of their draft capital, huh? At least first round picks here in the secondary, and high football IQ guys. And I think when you have that many, and then you have Wiggins now with some time on task, if it needs to not be Awuzie for aging purposes or injury purposes, I think you can leverage it okay. Now, it'll still be a matchup that teams are going to come in and attack on a week-by-week basis until somebody proves that they're ready to rise to the occasion. But kind of like the guard spot, I see a lot of young competition to push a guy who's been pegged to come in and be an answer. So I like the makeup of it. I like guys that had tools, various amounts of physical tools that were stand out. that they've drafted that maybe were smaller school guys or more really skill specific guys like a TJ Tampa with how he's kind of a more physical guy versus Longer Beam's kind of this twitchy slot type player. So I like the makeup of the body types and the physical skill sets, and the ceiling super high because they dump a bunch of first round picks here in the back end.
A lot of versatility too with where guys can line up. So a loaded team offensively, defensively. The questions feel small. The pipeline of development is great. Team that's been knocking on the door. I mean, firmly a Super Bowl contender for me, where, I think they're part of a list of maybe 6 or 7 teams where I say, you know what? Yeah, they have the stuff. They just got to play their best football in January.
Yeah. And I expect that they will win this division again, health willing, in 2025. It will be competitive, but they have the most answers at the most spots in my mind out of this division.
Good spot to be.
That's going to do it for us with the AFC North takes tomorrow on the show. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino, we appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day, and we will be back again tomorrow.